Keeps it authentic. All right.
There.
Hello, my name is Tom Graham, and welcome to Being Heard. I am committed to every voice being heard, including my own. Today, I have Jacob McGil. Welcome, Jacob.
Hi, Tom.
Would you tell a little? Today we're going to talk about the 7P's: passion, perseverance, perspective, priorities, purpose, patience, and prayer. And you don't have to memorize any of that. I'll have questions specific to each one. And would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so my name is Jacob McGil, and for the greater context, I'm two main things. I'm the founder of the 100-Year Plan,
Mhm.
which this literal framework has a lot to do with. And then I'm also the founder of 80/20 Media. And what I do is really help people align with their purpose, and then after working on the alignment and the personal alignment side of things, take that out and be in service to others in the world. And the 100-Year Plan's been around for 20 years. It's an amalgamation of systems that literally saved my life after I got out of the hospital. When I was 17, I was airlifted from a car accident and put into ICU in a coma. I had multiple surgeries and a whole bunch of stuff. And what I found is that the life-saving part of the medical system is miraculous and incredible. And then the what to do next part wasn't, there weren't enough pieces in place to go back to living a normal life, never mind a great life. So I ended up spending a decade in rehabilitation. It took me about 6 years to put my own body back together and honestly restore it to a level of functionality that's probably better than had I not had the accident and the motivation. And then I just kind of continued learning. And for a while, I was just addicted to the learning side of things, but I started getting more and more into the practice.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, now I've kind of got my 10,000 hours. I've worked with thousands of clients. I took my practice online 6.5 years ago. And while building that in another business, I managed to kind of really open my life up. And I've been on a working vacation through 29 countries so far. And the impetus to take the 100-Year Plan online is how 80/20 Media came into being. I had to figure out all these things, and by the time I realized what was necessary, it struck me that there was a whole other service that existed. And so that's really what I do. I live and work into my two dream jobs day to day, week to week, and year to year, and use them to spend as much time as possible outside, because the mountains are my church. It's the place where I just go to get aligned. You mentioned one of your P's is prayer. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm sure we'll get into that in that question. So
Maybe.
yeah, thank you for having me here, and I'm ready to play.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. I'm excited to have you here. And the first one is passion. And so the question is, so let me just frame it. These are the same 7 questions that I have set up for everybody. And so it might not fit depending on how it goes. And I still ask the same question. So I'm just putting that out there. So passion, how do you take actions to increase your passion?
Good. I'm gonna try and keep a habit today as well, and that is, like, I'm gonna recreate the question first,
Okay.
which is, how do I take actions? And
Mhm.
what's the specific
To
word?
increase, to
To
increase.
increase. See, yeah, I like that. It puts me on the hook. You know, as much as my like intro speech sounds impressive, one of the things I know about human beings being one is that we normalize really quickly. And so causing something day to day can become mundane, repeating the same thing over and over. So the very fact that you're asking me about increasing my passion is a challenge. I really appreciate that. The most consistent way that I increase my passion, where I take on that challenge, is by serving others to do the same. I've gone through several periods in my life where I'm good at putting systems together. And so in my healthcare practice, right, that's why the 100-year plan exists. It's a whole bunch of equilateral triangles. And every time I've found a problem, I can build a triangle to solve it. It's a concept I got from Buckminster Fuller, because every triangle breaks apart into a fulcrum and a lever.
Uh-huh.
And so at first I was passionate about learning, and then I became passionate about figuring systems out. And then I became passionate about putting the systems together in a way that worked. But all of that stuff ended up in a sort of dead end, because it was serving my interest.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like this thing that can happen in meditation where you just kind of do a lot of navel gazing.
Okay.
And you're just like thinking about yourself or meditating on yourself. And so the thing that has consistently increased my passion is like, how does this serve others? Like in the healthcare world, when I was running my clinic, which I had for 6 years, it really caused me to leave the learning stage and go into the serving stage.
Yeah.
Where I had to test and prove concepts. And it's been really interesting to spend most of my professional life on the fringe of the medical system. And it wasn't until I really got consistently committed to forgetting about my system, forgetting about my knowledge, forgetting about all the stuff that I had learned, and looking at the brain and body of this other human being and going, what does it need the most right now? That I actually started getting results. That was a major breakthrough for me, was like getting rid of my interests in my work and myself and my stuff, and being like, how does this serve? How does this serve? How does this serve? And that carved out the pathway for me to really open myself up to making what I do only about other people. And the ironic part of it is, I figured that out in the 100-year plan. I grew it to a consistent waiting list. I'm on the fringe of the medical system, but lawyers and insurance companies were sending me clients. I started getting doctors as clients. And that led to a certain amount of burnout at one point. And then I went in to start 80/20 Media, and I fell into the same trap. How do I take the 100-year plan online? And at first it was all about serving me, my business. I'd like to say that I was able to take the wisdom of how I developed the 100-year plan and transfer it immediately. But the honest truth is I completely failed at realizing that. And we built a company, and it's a service organization, and it's meant to help other people expand their business in the digital realm and all that kind of stuff. And none of the systems were in place to really serve other people. Right? We only kind of half built it. It was well intended, but poorly set up and poorly designed. And it took maybe the first 2 or 3 years of being in business and several large setbacks to force me back into that same position I went through with the 100-year plan and be like, oh, right. It has to be about serving other people.
I got it.
Yeah. So that's what we focus on now. And it was hard won and embarrassing that I had to like lose connection with that whole thing to find it again.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate your generosity with that.
Yeah, thank you.
And what I heard was it's like focus on others and be in the moment.
Yeah,
So that's cool.
yeah, those are essential pieces.
Yeah. And the one thing I want to throw out is there is no right or wrong here.
Mhm.
And so there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's a place to look.
Yeah,
So thanks for what you shared.
thank you.
Yeah. Um, is there anything else there you want to share about that, or is it
Um, yeah, not off the top of my head right now, and like
okay?
that's because it's just gotten really clear lately. Like I've kind of come full circle back to that piece,
Yep.
and so it's I guess the timing of this works really well for us because it's one of those things that's really finally landed again.
Mhm. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, the next
So I
word
get
is
to sound like I know what I'm doing, even though I've been lost for the last however long.
cracks me up.
Yeah.
The next one is perseverance. What is worth so much that you would push through anything to have?
Yeah, that's a great question. What is worth so much that I push through anything to have? I've got a whole bunch of different examples of that because it's how I got where I am today. And so it's like the first cycle of that was really self-serving, right? Like my well-being was so important to have that I push through anything. And one of the things I do with the 100-year plan is like the body learns through movement.
Okay.
So if you want to get pain free, which means you have to align your structure and open the joints so that tubes and wires aren't being pressed on,
Yep.
right? Restoring functionality has to happen through movement. And so what I did, for example, is I had a movement regime and it changed over the years, but there was at least a decade where I never missed a day,
Mm-hmm.
right? I always did something 20 to 30 minutes, usually in the morning because I developed a really strong habit. And that was like the first cycle of, absolutely persisting. And what's interesting about that is that fed the second cycle. And somewhere into that period of time, it stopped being me doing it for my body and became my body demanding it of me.
Okay.
Right. And like the brain teaches the body, and then the body actually trains the mind. And I feel like I recovered something that was lost in childhood. And that's a sense of physical impatience where I can't sit for too long,
Okay.
but that's because we're not supposed to sit. Right. And it's like healthy to actually be able to get that information from the nervous system and be like, oh, okay, like sitting is done. And that opened up a whole door to me because, again, some of the things I absolutely love doing are going out and being mobile, especially in nature. And so hiking, climbing, playing in the mountains, backcountry skiing, all that kind of stuff. Um, you're moving all day. You're just moving, 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 moving. And you do enough of that stuff. And again, your body starts to realize that extended sitting is sort of nonsense. And it doesn't allow you to do that. And it interrupts your behavior. And that's kind of like that second cycle. And that's what kind of fed me forward into this concept of serving others too, is when you create enough of a pull, then being stuck doesn't really happen. Like it's not that barriers don't show up in life, they absolutely do, but the impetus is there to just find a way around them because what's on the other side is so important or so desirable, or you're just like compelled to move towards it. And I kind of live that every single time I go out onto hiking and climbing and anything with elevation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's don't always make it, but like the summit is there just waiting for you. And you just hope everything works out and the weather and the daylight and all those things coincide in your favor. And you do get to the top. And like sometimes you don't, but the fun of like feeding into that desire to go there and be there, it makes all sorts of stuff worthwhile. Ridiculous things, right? Like a hike that might take 4 to 6 hours to do, but has like 6.5 hours of driving on either side, right? Just because it's like, oh, that thing, it's another one of those things. And they're all so unique and different and individual too. There's never been like two mountains that are the same. And there's something about that too that I think I'll find out later. Like this question's brought it up, but it answers, there's an answer to another question, which is like, why am I willing to go back and do the same hike over and over and over again too?
Is it
Because
the
you'd think
is it the same
like,
hike?
I could list dozens of them that I've done 10 times.
You're not the same person.
Yeah, right. And like, oh, but it's just the same trail, but it's not. It's so different every single time that there's no way of saying I've been here before and I've done this before, even though you could point on a map and say, I know where that is.
Yeah. Or I left a rock here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always something to discover about it. And I think that's part of the compulsion and part of that thing that the first question brought up too. It's like when you get into that place of like the journey or serving others or that kind of stuff, you're never repeating yourself. There's never a chance to pretend that boredom happens.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. The next question is about perspective. And so, would shifting your perspective change your level of joy in the moment?
I'm going to do that physically right now. And we kind of talked about this before we started the recording, but 100%. Right. I don't want to belittle the power of the question by saying, how could it not? But like a change of perspective, shifting. It's just such a powerful thing to be able to look at what you think the same thing is and see it differently means that the thing that I make it mean anyway, my point of view on the question is you have to change yourself to look at something differently. And that brings you, in my opinion, into being in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like living in the past or projecting to the future are both fictions that they serve a purpose and there's a use for them, but they're not reality. Reality is like all we have is right now, and now is always changing. And so, having a shifting perspective is accepting that fact, and having a static perspective is denying it. So I think all sorts of things are possible when we commit to that. It's like that that Goethe quote: "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy."
Mm.
Right. And so if you commit to the present moment, then you're committing to a shifting perspective. And then, as he says, right, all sorts of things that you could have never imagined can just open up in front of you and be available to you.
I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Anything else there about that one?
Um, I think life continues to be really exciting and vigorous when you are aware of how little you know. Which, that question brings that up.
Yeah. And the reason I laugh is because I've been saying that a lot, where I don't know, and I catch myself talking to myself, I don't know, and it's like and I catch myself saying it. It's like, oops. So
Yeah,
it's funny.
I think it's a really powerful place.
Yeah. So you made me giggle. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You ready for the next one?
Yeah.
All right. The next word is priorities.
Okay.
Are your priorities setting you up for success in creating more joy?
Yes. And the reason my priorities are setting me up for success and creating more joy is because I've had some fantastic people to work with over the years, and one of them in particular, he's given up a lot of stuff in order to focus on being joyful, like a lot of things. um
When you say a lot of stuff, that sounds like material stuff, but I think you mean something else.
I mean it on so many different levels that it's heroic, like
Hmm.
material, but then like after avoiding the material stuff, then the mental and emotional clutter shows up
Okay.
because you can't get lost in the physical clutter anymore. And so to hang out with somebody who's committed to keeping really clean space has been amazing. And it's deeply influenced me on understanding, well, for me, from my point of view, like what the purpose of life really is. Right. And it's like living joyfully.
Hmm.
And that's where like the work that we're doing, especially in 80/20 media, consistently is about eliminating that clutter. Because I find that a lot of people I come into contact with are not living joyfully. And that, from what I see, is part of what perpetuates this addiction to consumption that a lot of our culture, a lot of our society has. Right? If you don't have joy, then you need stuff because you are constantly told that stuff will make you happy. And then you have to keep on buying things because each new thing only stays shiny for a little while. And so then it's on to the next thing. And that keeps that flywheel of consumption going. And most of that stuff isn't necessary. Right? Like I don't have any judgment about it. I just can't see personally the value of, owning 8 watches as an example, when like you have one, maybe 2 wrists.
Right.
Right. And like that's just a metaphor for 100 different ways that we do this stuff. And it doesn't mean that some of them aren't fantastic works of art, but if they are, then how come they're in little boxes in a drawer in the back of a closet somewhere? Right? Like art is meant to be hung on a wall, not hidden away. So it just kind of demonstrates how like this myth of more thing keeps perpetuating because of our lack of commitment to joy. And I don't think people are consciously saying, oh, I don't want to be joyful, I just want to consume stuff. I just don't think a lot of permission is being given to be like, it's okay to drop everything else and focus only on what brings you joy. Right? We're indoctrinated and trained to do the opposite of that. And then it becomes habit and we forget that there's even a choice involved.
Yeah, you just touched on something that resonates with me, is not having a conscious choice of it.
Yeah.
And that's like, I had a conversation with somebody and I said, did you actually choose to drink those first 4 drinks? Did you
Right.
realize did you realize that you drank that many? Oh,
Right.
no. And the answer was no. I'm like, okay, well, you might want to look at that, because I'm okay with you doing whatever, as long as you're choosing it.
Yeah. And that's the piece, right? Like that kind of revolves around what the definition of an addiction is it's like a unconscious habit. And it takes time to become conscious of it, but then you can make a choice, then you can choose.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else about priorities?
Um, just an interesting thing, right? It has to do with savoring. Like if we go back to drinks for a second,
Sure.
I don't know a lot about wine or coffee, but you watch people who are there as professionals to taste it, and they have such weird ways of doing stuff, right? And like wine, especially, maybe coffee as well, like the whole aspiration thing where you like sip it, but pull in a bunch of air so you can mix it properly in your mouth, and then you swirl it around. And like one sip takes like 1.5 minutes. And then by the time they're done all of it, they spit it out. So I guess that's what like really conscious wine consumption looks like.
Yeah. And that's funny, because when you started saying that, I was like, okay, so gulpers are not conscious of
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. It's just a habit. It's not even the person.
Yeah. Interesting.
Definitely.
Well, the next one is purpose, if you're ready for it.
Yes, please.
All right. Is your ladder up against the right wall?
Yeah. Is my ladder up against the right wall? I think so. What I can tell you is I have gotten halfway up or more in several other occasions and come back down and chosen to move it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that for sure. And yeah, where I have it right now, I think it's the right thing. And the way that I can tell is I keep on checking back in about the joy. Right. And does
Yep.
does this make me joyful? Is it something that I can create joy out of doing in such a way that I feel compelled to do it again? And yeah, the answers are quite consistently yes these days, which hasn't always been the case.
Mm-hmm. So if I
So
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say, if I heard you right, you moved your ladder on the wall, optimizing for joy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And have gotten halfway up and realized, right, a couple times, like, oh, not quite as joyful as I thought or as I'm committed to, and then come down and moved it again.
Cool. Well, the second follow-up question for that is, that's great. And what are you building with it?
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I'm building a few different things, but the way that I'd simplify it is I'm building a legacy. And the way that I'm doing it is I'm leveraging this thing that I call the ripple effect. So let's go back to the healthcare stuff for a minute. Like when I first got started, in working with clients, it was almost about being right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I had these theories and the system and the way that I understood that the body works. And so I was like, if I do these things, it will become well.
Right.
And it was me conquering their pain,
Mm-hmm.
right? By putting the things in the right place and in the right way so that they're more functional, restoring functionality to an organism. But when it really started to change for me was it had a lot to do with the clients who came in through insurance and how defeated a lot of them were by the
Mm-hmm.
system, and how the intake appointment was always the same story about them fed up, frustrated, and listing the 9 other things they'd done before they finally came to see me. So they're like dejected, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the impact on them, but the thing that really shifted for me was how it impacted other people's lives, right? When you've got a dad who has a young child, like somewhere between an infant and a toddler, and they have the kind of back pain where they don't feel safe taking their kid to the playground because they can't like move quickly enough to prevent it from falling or whatever it is, right? Or a little bit bigger kid is like, pick me up. And they're like, I can't, it hurts to do that. And seeing how that rippled out, and
Right.
then understanding of like, oh, like one of the things that pain does is it really clouds us, right? It gives us a shorter fuse. It like limits our ability to move, to think, to breathe, to respond to the people in our lives, to pay attention to them. Like all these things are limited by it.
Mm-hmm.
And so as these people became more pain-free, less inhibited, they became more present to the other people in their lives. And that's maybe the first time that I really understood that some of these limitations were real, right? Like when you're in survival mode, it's kind of hard for you to go out and be like, I'm a champion for this for other people. It doesn't work, right? Because your nervous system's so occupied with survival.
Right.
And so I saw that in the first iteration, and then that really guided me in the stuff that I did all the way through the healthcare practice, which I still run, and into the business development side of stuff with the media company, right? Is our
Mm-hmm.
number one job is actually to get people out of survival so they can do alignment and work on their joy. And then we can expand that, because otherwise we're just perpetuating the system, right? You take people who are like stuck. My one of my mentors said this. He's like the one of the worst things that can happen to an individual is to find out that you're relatively good at something that you don't really enjoy, and then you become reliant on it for income, right? Because you just
That's
get
like golden
stuck.
handcuffs, right?
It's exactly that. And then you get stuck there, and then it's the means to your survival. So if you want to move into joy or alignment, you're threatening your survival, and like that's just punishment. It sounds like hell.
Right.
But a lot of societies like working like that, and it just doesn't work. So yeah,
So in a,
changing that from the core is that thing.
so what I'm hearing is you're building a system that empowers people to optimize their joy in their life.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Is it's less and less about the system and more about asking people what brings them the most joy, and then building around that, right? And like, whereas the habit before was to prescribe things,
Right.
right? Everybody do this. Here are your Lego blocks. Put them together in this order. Put a red one on a blue one on a green one.
Yep.
And it's like, but hold on a minute. like what feels the best to you? What's the best way of building this in a way that serves you being the most joyful so that you can, be your best self in service to others? I was explaining this to somebody the other day, which is great. I got really challenged in a conversation and she kept on pushing back and like, this world that you're a part of, it's all perpetuating the same bullshit, blah, blah, blah. I've been offered these things before. And it's like, wait a minute. This is a regenerative model. I know it occurs to you as more of the same, but trust me, it's not. Like when you plant seeds, right? Like the seeds just kind of go out and fall wherever they fall. And like nobody comes along and it's like that seed's going to grow when that one's not going to, and this one gets water and this one doesn't. Like when it rains, it rains. Each seed falls in a different place and they kind of grow their own accord. That's how nature works. And so it really is like the environment dictates the thriving of it. And we get really caught up in like trying to find the perfect seed and plant the perfect seed instead of just creating this really great environment for things to grow inside of. And that's what I've kind of come to now is just really focusing on that environment, right? So that I can just build a space for things to thrive and then they can come in on their own and grow in the way that suits them. There's a Buddhist poem about it, right? And it basically says like you wouldn't go to a peach tree and try and pick a plum.
It seems intuitive and
yeah.
Exactly. Well, the next word is patience. Are there areas where you don't have patience?
Yes.
And then do you have a pattern?
Yeah, absolutely. And the pattern is important. I think the most effective way that I can work on my patience is paying attention to the instructions, recommendations, and advice that I give other people. Right? Like if we go back to the rehabilitation work for a second, if somebody brings an injury to me, I can be very, very precise about managing their expectations, telling them to slow down, saying like it's worth doing this properly, don't rush it, it's going to be this long, make sure you're doing the little incremental steps each day, managing your routine, listening to your body, resting when it's appropriate, recovering when it's appropriate, doing these things, which are mostly what the stuff that I teach, in order to recover. And I could talk about that for the rest of this session or for hours. And then there's the fact that with my own injury, I lose sight of that process, right? I get impatient. I want my recovery to be faster than is logical or sensible or realistic. And, noticing that in the same time in working with clients in 80/20 media as well, right? The habits are there too.
Sure.
So focusing on the alignment stuff and the joy stuff seems to be the place that brings me back to being patient, bringing on that behavior. And then the rest of it, I think, is just anticipating the fact that, I get excited and I really want to move forward with things. And that's where I start to ignore the process and how many steps there are and want things to happen faster than it is natural.
Cool.
And so I just keep on reminding myself of that seed analogy it's been really helpful, right? Because there's no way logically that you can like convince a plant to grow any faster, and you can't push the seasons any quicker. So, try as you might, as impatient as you might want to be, if you're just going to go out and start dumping seeds and fertilizer on the ground in February, they're just going to fall in the snow.
Right. That is, if you live where it's snowing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're all the way to the last question, the last P, and it's
Okay.
prayer. And just to let you know, this one's a little bit slanted.
Perfect.
And do you use prayer for when you're proud, for when you're grateful, for what you desire, and for expressing what you love about yourself?
Yes. And I can absolutely own that consistently and effectively are questionable. Right.
Okay,
Like
well,
I make
welcome to
sure that
humanity.
I make sure that I'm grateful for something every day. And I like have my little thing at the end of the day where I'm like, okay, these 3 things at least I am grateful for today.
Yep.
But throughout the day, do I like pause, be like, wow, the mountains are so beautiful today. Like I'm really fortunate. I've got these like floor to ceiling windows and I can see the North Shore Mountains right there.
Mm-hmm.
And do I spend time appreciating them? Right? Like when I made my coffee this morning, I glanced at them, but I didn't turn the chair and just sit and face only them instead of, you know, checking my computer or doing something else as part of that ritual. So I can see where there's places where I could make a authentic commitment to gratitude or appreciation, or like you said, the last part of that, appreciating myself. And all of those things would be slowing down a bit more
Mm.
to actually be there while I'm doing them, instead of I'm just I'm clear that ticking the gratitude box at the end of the day doesn't quite encompass everything that's available with gratitude, for example.
Okay. I got it. Well, that's the end of the 7 questions.
Okay.
And what's there is I'm very grateful for you and sharing so generously.
Yeah, thank you for creating the space for this.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to be acknowledged for?
But we started this out just before you began the recording, and the only thing, and I'm like, not just for me but for other people, like I feel like there's really some sort of benefit to putting myself in a different physical position.
Yeah.
It allowed me to be more present to the questions and let what I believe is some of the work that has to happen in here as well, to really take full participation in the process that you've created for people. And so I want to be acknowledged for doing that for my own being, organism, whatever, and then maybe paving a little space for others too. Like, it's totally okay to be exactly where your body needs to be so you can really do this work.
Got it. Well, Jacob, I acknowledge you for creating this new way of being in conversation and being authentic to yourself, your body, and really taking on looking, like authentically looking at what's there. And yeah, I'm grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, thanks for being willing to hold that space. And just I mean, it came up in the questions earlier, right? But I really do believe that the commitment to an environment makes more difference than we're willing to acknowledge. And so like that space that you've created is so much more than just the questions. And it really made a difference. Like my neck released a bunch of stuff. My middle back feels great. And it didn't feel poorly when I, left my chair. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to stop it here and
Okay.
then we'll talk for a bit of bonus. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.